Welcome to a new episode of Erasing Shame. My name is DJ Chuang, and I'm privileged to be joined by Grace Sangalang Ng, and she is researching this topic of shame, but I'll let her describe how she got into this because we're here to talk about erasing shame, have some honest talk for healthy living. Thank you for joining me, Grace.
Hi, good to be here.
Great. So tell us who you are and what it is that you're doing.
Okay, so as you mentioned, my name is Grace Sangalang Ng. I'm a doctoral student at Biola University at Talbot School of Theology in the doctorate in educational studies. And right now I'm actually researching how shame affects Asian Americans in the classroom. Hopefully writing my dissertation topic on that. So I am really interested in the topic of shame.
Wow, that's perfect for many of our listeners and viewers here because we do have a good percentage that are Asian American and many of them are educated, so they are in the classroom. So how did you get interested in this topic and maybe talk a bit about your childhood and upbringing? How did family shape you and become a context where you experienced a bit of shame?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of my interest of this topic comes from my own experience. I'm second generation Filipino-American. So my parents immigrated from the Philippines in the 1970s. They came to America, and then I was born in America, and so was my brother. So growing up, it was me and my brother, and my parents, they worked really, really hard, as with, similar to a lot of immigrant parents. They sacrificed a lot to come to America and to provide a better life for me and my brother. And so because of that, I think I carried a lot of that burden. There's actually this phrase in Tagalog or Filipino called utang na loob. Translated, it means debt from the inside. And so if like someone does something for you, especially like a family member, like parents providing for their children, children become indebted in a way to their parents. And so I think in a lot of ways I carried and internalized that burden, even though, I couldn't articulate that like growing up as a kid. But I think I really felt, the necessity to work really hard and to do well in school, and to not fail, because I wanted to please my parents, because I felt like they've done so much for me. I really want to do as much as I can to honor them and to not bring shame on our family. And so I think a lot of my experience with shame stems from that, that wanting to, please my parents and perform and do well and excel in academics. And so fast forward, how I got interested in researching it is I went to Talbot for my master's degree. And so after that, during my program, I explored a lot of these family dynamics and how it kind of like formed my character and shaped how I respond to things. And I think in that process, I realized, the reasons why I struggle with articulating my emotions or expressing what I'm feeling inside is because I didn't have the space to do that growing up. I was so busy doing, and trying to do what my parents wanted me to do or be the person they wanted me to be, that I had no voice of my own. And so I wasn't able to express like what I was internally feeling. And when I did feel sadness or anger or like negative emotion, I felt shameful for feeling those negative emotions because my parents didn't really give me like the space to express those things. And so that kind of made the shame worse. And so it was really hard, I think, to ask for help because I wasn't able to even know what I was feeling inside. And so in my graduate program, I think I uncovered a lot of those layers and realized, oh, the thing that's kind of keeping me down is that shame, that feeling of not good enough. So yeah.
Well, let's explore that a little bit, because the story sounds fairly common, that many Asian American families in this generation do have parents that immigrate, and they do work very hard to provide, and they do hope and desire that their children would aspire to the Asian American dream, which is a college degree and possibly a graduate degree, and then go on to get married and have grandkids and then repeat the cycle. But in that journey, there are people that don't excel. Actually, the majority of people don't excel, but we only see the ones that are celebrated and the ones that do excel. And then what happens to the rest of us, right? And then because we're in this common situation, we don't know that there's help. So what opened your eyes to the situation that you were in? Did something happen that you couldn't quite get the right grades, or were you disciplined or punished for missing a class or something?
The big thing that kind of like triggered, all this emotion to come out of me, and me realizing, oh, I really need help because I can't actually like process or really control all of this emotion coming out, was my friend actually went missing for 24 hours. And so because of that, it was like a super high anxiety, stressful situation. And I think like the years and years of emotions and anxiety that I like kept bottled up, it kind of hit that tipping point. And so at that point, I was kind of just like exploding and leaking everywhere, even towards my parents. Like they were like, we don't even know what to do with you, Grace. And so I think at that point, that's when I was like, I really need help. I really need to talk to a counselor or to a spiritual director. So that's the point where I actually started doing therapy and spiritual direction. And because I was in a graduate program that encouraged that, it was really helpful because the resources were actually like available to me in my program. So I was grateful for that.
So are you saying you didn't really hit the wall until graduate school, or did you have smaller incidents in high school and middle school and undergrad?
I mean, in high school, I think I did struggle with depression. There were times where, it was just like, I would wake up and I would feel like, even though I was like trying to do all these things to please my parents, like I was so tired and fatigued of like doing so much that I had thoughts of like, why don't I, like, can I just die? Like, I'm just tired of trying. Like, it would be easier if I could just stop everything. I think it was just, the great burden that I carried. And so in those times where I was feeling like really down and, thoughts of like suicide or harming myself would come into mind. Those were also periods where I'm like, I think I need to talk to someone because it was getting like too severe. So I would usually, even though I didn't get like professional help, I would try to talk to like a close friend. And I think, reaching out to someone was something that really helped me overcome those feelings and those really dark times.
Can you say how long was the struggle, and were there any other things that you did that were helpful?
Well, I think all through maybe like my sophomore to senior years of high school, I think it was kind of off and on, and even through college. I just had periods where I really struggled. I can't really think of like exactly how long, because it was mostly just like periods of time. But talking to people, I think that was probably the most helpful. Reaching out to a close friend, telling them what I was going through, and then them like loving me in that process. I think that was the most beneficial thing that helped me. So, yeah.
Now, what did you study undergrad? Was it related to what you're studying now in grad school?
I was an English major, so not super related, but yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy like literature and reading and writing. And so I think that really helped prepare me for grad school in a lot of ways because it's a lot of reading and writing. So yeah.
Very good. So you got your master's degree and then now you're working on your PhD. Can you summarize some of the findings that you discovered in your master's study about Asian Americans and shame?
Yeah, so in my master's thesis, it was about how Asian Americans experience shame and how that affects their relationships with God and with others. And so, yeah, I think I just read a lot of literature about it and kind of integrated different things, like looking at like the Bible as a source, seeing how honor and shame played out in the Bible and how that affects also like the psychology part of shame, how we like experience the feeling of shame, how that's one dynamic of shame. And then there's also the cultural aspect of shame, especially like in the Asian American community, because it is more of like a communal group oriented culture. I think oftentimes we care a lot about how people view us or see us because we really want to make sure that we are belonging to our group. And like, we don't want to get shamed because we don't want to get separated from belonging to that group. So there's a whole lot of different aspects of shame. I think that's pretty much like through my master's thesis, I realized, there was so many different layers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then currently, because I realized there's so many layers, I needed to kind of like narrow down in what I wanted to study for my current program. And so I think because it is an educational studies, I was seeing, how does shame affect Asian Americans and the way they learn, especially in the classroom? Because I think in the classroom, a lot of the honor shame dynamics are at play with like the teacher-student relationship. Because Asians really, I think, want to honor, or they really put like their teachers up on a pedestal or like of a place in authority. And because of that, I think Asian Americans, I think, tend to be more, and Asians and Asian Americans, I think, tend to be usually more quiet in the classroom, as I've observed in classes that I've been in. They don't, want to speak out as much as maybe their like other classmates, because I think part of that is that they don't want to bring like shame upon themselves, and because they really fear the authority of their like teachers. So yeah, those are a few things that I've seen in my research.
Well, that's fascinating because as we've done this Erasing Shame podcast since February, so it's been about 9 months now, almost every week, we've just also discovered that there's many layers and many aspects to shame. It's almost like a black hole that the further we dig in is the more that we discover. And part of the reason, I think, is because we haven't studied it and we haven't talked about it. And it takes on a whole nother flavor when it comes into the Asian American context, because we have two cultures that are kind of clashy sometimes. And then a lot of the research tends to be done in the Western world, where psychology is much more advanced or much more developed, but from an individualistic model, which doesn't quite transfer into our particular context. So it's good that you shared a couple examples there. Would you say that there are distinctives between different Asian ethnicities? Have you noticed some differences between the largely majority East Asians, like Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, versus being Filipino, which would be more Southeastern.
Yeah, I definitely think there are differences. I honestly haven't really delved as much into it. Um, Speaking from my own experience as a Filipino-American, I think for Filipinos, yeah, the honor-shame dynamic comes in the, as I said previously, like the utang na loob, like the debt from the inside. And then like that's the reason why children don't want to like disappoint or dishonor their family. And then also like Filipino culture is considered a really happy culture. A lot of times Filipinos are very like hospitable and really like easygoing, laid back, more of a kind of like the islander culture. And so, which is really fun. I mean, like, yeah, we have really great parties, you know, karaoke and all that good stuff. It's a lot of laughing.
Yeah.
We laugh at everything, you know, so we have a great time. Like we're great at celebrating. I think
That's
that's
great.
one of our strengths. And
And
also,
you know what? We're entering the Christmas season, and it reminds me of a Anthony Bourdain episode where he was in Manila, I think, and they were celebrating Christmas the whole month.
yeah, yeah, their
And those
celebrations
were
are,
great with music and dancing. Uh, that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, their celebrations are huge. Yeah, they have like full on huge like Christmas lights everywhere and their stars and nativities like everywhere. So yeah, it's a really fun time, like Christmas time over there. Yeah, so that's the fun part of I think Filipino culture. But on the flip side, is that it's like negative emotions like anger and sadness are not really there's not really a space to express that in a culture that's always happy.
Mm,
And so I think because of that, you know, when Filipino Americans experience like sadness or anger or grief, like they don't know what to do with that. And then that can cause even more shame, just even in experiencing the feelings. So that's kind of the more like downside of the cultural aspect of the happy culture.
mm.
So there's always, you know, like a good and bad side, I think, of every like aspect. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of other like,
Oh, that's okay.
but I just can't think of it at the moment. So yeah.
Well, you live it, and so it's not something we readily talk about, like what's my culture versus someone else's culture. But you've done a very good job. So thank you for exploring that a bit with me, because I'm finding that a lot of culture is just lived rather than explained. And
Mm-hmm.
so until you're in that context and you're having conversations and relating to people, a lot of those things don't quite uh, don't quite make sense, or they're not understandable. You know, even for me as a Chinese American, I didn't understand Chinese culture until I was in a Chinese church with many Chinese instead of just my own family. And it was a rude awakening, but it helped me to realize culture is quite a dynamic thing. So as we wrap up, good luck on your studies,
Thanks.
and glad you're tackling this really big topic. And I hope you discover some things that will be helpful to many Asian Americans as they go through the classroom. Any last thought you would like to share with our listeners, particularly those that might be struggling and maybe don't know that they can find help?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would encourage listeners is that oftentimes shame isolates us and makes us want to hide and cover because we don't want people to see us. But in that place, I think, is the place where we actually need the most help and need to reach out to someone. Yeah, so I think if people are feeling really alone or really feeling that shame of not feeling good enough, I think that's really the point where, you know, just reaching out to a friend saying, hey, you know, can we just hang out for a little bit? Or even just someone's presence with you in that place, I think even helps take you out of yourself. Just having someone there, even if they're not even talking to you, even if you're just like sitting, watching a movie, you know, doing something together. If it's too hard to talk, I think, yeah, just taking that step of reaching out is so important.
Very good. Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you for joining us on Erasing Shame. And we want to provide an open hand and a safe place for those of you that want to reach out. And we have a confidential voicemail as well as a confidential contact form at erasingshame.com. And you can also connect with us on Facebook and YouTube and catch us on your podcasting device wherever you subscribe and listen. Until next week, thank you for watching and listening, and connect with us on erasingshame.com. Bye-bye.